All right, everyone, we are 3 minutes in today and we've got lots to discuss. So firstly, we'd like to welcome everyone to the first of DBL's Asia Thought Leadership Masterclasses for 2022. So I'm Val, lead consultant for DBL's Asia region, and we are all very excited to be joined by a diverse audience across Asia. So in case you're curious, most of your peers on this call are dialing in from India. We've got people from Phnom Penh, Vietnam, China, Hong Kong, Singapore, Philippines and Malaysia, just to name a few. So before we kick off the session proper, let's start by sharing some fun facts. So do you guys know that there are a number of multi-talented people among us in this session today? So just sharing, we've got someone who was a performer for Universal Studios opening parade, very nice. A magnanimous talent who hiked the Great Wall of China for 5 days for charity. And I actually am not sure how her legs must have felt after that. We've also got someone who's a semi-professional street Latin dancer, a DJ, very impressive people, and also someone who is on his journey of becoming a scientific philosopher. So goodness me, I can actually honestly just go on and on, but isn't it good to know that we are always surrounded by multi-talented and great people who are good at many things. So anyway, back to the structure of today's call. DBL's Global CEO, Angela Hans, will kick off by sharing some data points coming through based on our research and trends happening in this region. We'll then be joined by an amazing panel who will be sharing perspectives on the current and future support our early talent and managers need in today's climate. So once again, thank you to our esteemed panelists, Agnes, Daniel, Karishma, and Kelvin for graciously contributing your invaluable insights today. On our end, we'll also have the privilege to be joined by Josh McKenzie, DBL's founder and chairman on our panel. And Josh has actually just arrived into Singapore from Sydney last evening after a 2-year travel hiatus. So welcome back to Singapore, Josh. Again, if time permits, at the end of the session, we'll have a short Q&A where you can just unmute yourselves to ask questions, or if you prefer to post your questions in the chat room, that's also perfectly fine. So in just about a second, I'll hand over the time to Angela. But before I do that, we've got some basic housekeeping to highlight. In typical DBL fashion, we always encourage lots of interactivity. So please feel free to pop in your questions or comments at any time in the chat room where I'll be monitoring it. We'll also like to see all your beautiful faces, so do turn on your cameras if you can. So without further ado, I would like to invite my CEO, Angela Hans, to kick us off for today's session. So over to you, Ange.
Thanks, Valerie, and thank you for the kind of introduction and the greetings. Fantastic to see you all here. 80 people and counting. We've got people still coming through the room, which just is another evident point for us to know how much we're really valuing connecting with each other as an industry and talking about all the things that we're passionate about when it comes to early career talent. So I'm excited to be here and to connect with you all, be it not in person, but of course virtually, which is always a great alternative. I'm just going to share my slides and get us going before we get into a panel discussion. So as Val mentioned, we're going to quickly jump into a welcome, and then I'm wanting to make sure we leverage as much time as we can to bring our esteemed panel together to start to bring their perspectives and share their insights of what's currently happening in the early career talent space within Asia. And then of course, we'll wrap that up with a wrap up to close us out at the end of the hour. First of all, for those of you who are not familiar with DBL, I know there's many on this call who are, so it's great to see you again. But for those who have come for the first time to one of our masterclasses, DBL is a human skills development company, and we focus on the future workforce. We back that through research, psychology, and behavioural science, and supported with our first-class trainers and our unparalleled heritage in early talent development. This helps us to understand what the needs of the interns, the graduates are now, and when we start to bring these conversations to our regions that we operate in, we then share those insights and then welcome our network, all of you, to then share your insights to really help us as an industry to move forward. DBL is proudly Australian born, but now global. We've got offices in London and Sydney and of course Singapore, which we're very proud to be in the region. And for those who may or may not be aware, like everybody, 2020 and 2021 was a really significant year for DBL. We, along with a lot of our fantastic clients who supported us, a lot who are on this call with us today, we supported over 130,000 students, interns, and graduates in career transition at a really significant time of their career, but also for us globally in a world that we were navigating in quite unfamiliar territories. So we're really, really proud of the work that we've done and the partnerships we've had, and got some insights that we'd like to share with you all as well. With that, we have a mission. Our mission is that we want to support 1 million young people each year by 2025. And so our team of passionate team members around the world are working with us and our client partners to establish how we do that. And then, of course, we are always humbled by the recognitions that we get globally and through specific recognition awards that we have. In particular, we're very proud of our most recent one being the finalist at the HR Vendor of the Year Awards in Asia for best response to COVID-19. So thanks to our team for all their support in doing that with us. So today, what we're going to talk about is the landscape now. Like, where are we up to here? We're in a time where we are navigating hybrid environments. We have ourselves in particular pockets around the world coming out of lockdown, going back into lockdown, navigating or resetting what our workplace environment is looking like. And of course, with that, we have a lens of how does that look and feel for our early career talent as we're bringing interns into the business and as we're starting to think about the graduates when they come into our companies in the next few months. It goes without saying that COVID-19, presented huge challenges to governments, to businesses, and people from all walks of life. But as we've seen, its impacts has been highly varied. It's affected society in multiple ways. So what we've been seeing globally is, uneven geographical and socioeconomic patterns across Southeast Asia. We've seen how COVID-19 has revealed existing contradictions and inequalities in our society and globally. And, the responses from our regional governments to the pandemic have now become less frequent. And what we're now seeing in Southeast Asia is that it's starting to embrace a new normal of living with COVID-19. The burgeoning digital economy leading the pandemic recovery in this region and opening up a range of new opportunities, particularly for our young talent. So why this all sounds optimistic and we're navigating, light through the tunnel, there is still plenty of uncertainty for the next 6 to 12 months ahead, particularly for us in Southeast Asia and globally. And is yet to be truly defined what this new normal or what we're going to be resetting our workplace strategies in post-pandemic world and what that should look like. And importantly, what does that mean for our people? So when we start to think about that, and with that in mind, DBL, for those who aren't aware, we released a white paper end of last year on the subject of well-being, which is becoming an increasingly urgent and important area of focus for employers. And we know that there are clear commercial and human benefits to supporting well-being at work. So especially for our graduates and early career talent well-being, and even more so during times of transition and uncertainty. So globally, well-being has been on the decline for the last 10 years, and COVID has made a bad situation worse. And blended working contexts, while advantageous in many ways, what we're seeing is it's throwing up particular well-being challenges for certain groups. The research, just to give you an understanding of what we surveyed over hundreds of desk research, 4 surveys, surveyed directly over 1,000 senior executive talent HR across UK, Southeast Asia, Australia. And with those respondents across those areas, we found that the impact of COVID on wellbeing has not been a democratic one. Our research revealed depleted wellbeing for 3 specific wellbeing gap areas. First one being the led versus the leaders, so the people who are being led by more seniority, more senior managers coming into it. Women versus men, where we're seeing now disadvantages starting to play out with how women are navigating this current time and how are they thinking about that. And then, of course, what we're all passionate about, the early career versus the established talent. And so as we kind of explored that through our wellbeing and our masterclasses last year, which many of you have joined us for that, we had some wellbeing roundtable sessions in June, and then we also deep dived into student and graduate wellbeing in the gender gap in Southeast Asia in November. We're now sitting in 2022, about to head into April. and the landscape continues to change. And so for today, what we wanted to do was hear from our esteemed panel, not only on the lens of well-being, but also on training and development needs for early career talent against this latest landscape, and further, how managers can be empowered to provide the right support at this time. So we have a lot to cover. I encourage you all to use chat. If you've got inputs or stories to share, please do so in the chat. Valerie's kindly monitoring that for us, of course, with questions. And before I introduce the fantastic panel we have, also who will be joining us today is Josh McKenzie, who for the first time in 2 years is actually in Singapore, landed last night, got into the region, and fantastic to finally be able to travel and set the scene. So first of all, Josh, how are you and how is it being back in Singapore?
Oh, so good. It's one of my favorite cities in the world. It really is, along with Hong Kong. So yeah, 2.5 October 2019, just prior to the pandemic. You and I were here, Ange. It was the week before Christmas, and that was the last time on the ground. But have also just come from a week and a half in Sydney, which is where I'm from. So it was good to be home for the first time in more than 2 years. See the parents and the team in Sydney and all that sort of stuff. Just absolutely awesome. So fantastic to be able to join this session, not at 1 a.m.
Absolutely. Great to have you in the time zone and in region, in person as well. So for those who aren't aware, Josh is based in the UK and of course has not been able to come down this region. So I'll be inviting him to share more global perspectives and global trends, and just for us to compare kind of how are we seeing some of these shifts and this kind of new normal coming out in comparison to what we're also seeing within this region of Asia and Southeast Asia. Now, without further ado, we've got a fantastic panel lined up. Before I stop sharing my screen, I want to make sure I introduce those individuals thoroughly. We've got Calvin, who's head of our youth strategy at Lazada, based in Singapore. Welcome, Calvin, great to see you. We have Karishma, who is Senior Manager, Organizational Development and Talent at Sun Life. Quite new in the role, but of course, many of you would know Karishma from her work that she's done in our sector and in the region, and so has a lot of expertise and thoughts and feelings around what is currently happening. Thanks, Karishma. And we've got Daniel Lim, Employer Branding and Early Talent Lead for ABB. Again, a very familiar face. Met Daniel many times before. It's fantastic to have you join us. Thank you. And we've got Agnes Go, our Vice President Talent Acquisition. Covers quite a few territories, Agnes. So she goes right across Asia into Middle East, Africa at L'Oréal, so could bring some quite interesting perspectives across these regions coming into it. So please join me in welcoming the panel, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can all see each other, and we'll dive straight into it. So first of all, I want to focus on the lens of well-being, if we can, and to our panel. You know, when we think about well-being, what our research at DBL found that while a small majority of the 18 to 24-year-olds feel hopeful at the moment, with 27.9%, around 33.7% of them feel discouraged or concerned. And we also found that the 18 to 24 demographic was hit hardest from a well-being perspective by the pandemic for various reasons, from both society, where they are, the inability to be able to go on campus while they're studying, the inability to connect with employers and the traditional means that they've done that. All of this is starting to play out in how they're navigating their transition into the workforce. So I first like to ask the panel, how do you feel your early career talent, when you think about talent in your organization, how do you feel they're doing at the moment? I'd love to get your perspectives. Who would like to go first? Maybe Daniel, can I invite you to go first on that?
Sure. So my view is it's not really an easy time, a difficult one, probably even for us as well. So the way I see it is there are two quadrants. For those who have graduated and now are looking out for a job, I think across the past 2 years, some of the sentiments that are being shared is it's harder to get jobs, really. For some sectors, maybe the ones that are in the IT will say, you know, more options now. That's probably a unique situation. And for those who are into the role, I guess one of the biggest challenge that we've heard is the inability to sometimes connect with, you know, people within the organization. Like because it's all virtual, right? So then, you have the coffee side chats and this kind of things. So I would say it's probably more difficult, even for us as well, I have to say, like even for us not early talents. But yeah, that's just, I guess, to start it off.
Thanks, Daniel. Appreciate that. Karishma, how about yourself? What have you been observing from either your previous role or coming into your recent one? What have you been seeing and feeling about early talent?
Yeah, so in addition to everything that Daniel said, which is exactly what we've been seeing, I think the other thing that I've been hearing a lot of our early career talent telling us is difficult for them to switch off, especially because they're working from home, and separating their professional life from their personal life. And that's coming in the way of family life. Obviously well-being is something that's coming up all the time. The other thing that also we're looking at is some individuals, and these are obviously in small pockets, where individuals are feeling they're unable to have that conversation or that level of conversation with managers of deadlines. Are they realistic? Does it need to be delivered in 24 hours or 48 hours? And there's that fear of having that conversation, only because they're like, we're starting off our career. If I have this conversation now, am I coming across as being lazy? Versus actually being realistic that, hey, you've given me this and I've got all of these conflicting priorities. Where do I start? Sometimes managers can be a bit more empathetic in understanding that they're just about starting off their career and they need a bit more hand-holding, a bit more than if they were in the office physically. So these are, the two things that's coming out very loud and clear with a lot of the early career talents that I've been speaking with.
Yeah, super important. And it's already issues that we knew that they struggled with in person. So the natural ability of the exasperation of that when you're in a remote or virtual environment, I can totally appreciate where that's coming through. Great insights. Thank you. Calvin, can I go to you, and then Agnes, please follow at the end.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. Calvin here. Nice to meet you. I do not want to repeat what Daniel and Karishma said, because it's really, I agree with the points that you made there, right? I just bring I try to think through what's another perspective that I'm looking at. I'm wearing two hats here. I looked after a couple of key departments in about projects, as I say, in Lazada, but I also wear the hat of the executive director for the Mentoring Alliance of Singapore. So where we focus our time on helping Gen Zs and youth navigate life by finding a mentor. So we are building movements through technology to do that. So I try to share from that perspective. If I go back to your earlier question, how's the people in my company, which is Lazada, doing? I think right now, at this very moment, they are excited, they are busy, and they are looking forward, because we're having our birthday campaign this weekend. So everyone is working very hard for it. But along that note, right, I think that it wasn't like that maybe 4 months ago, where people are tired, and everything that Karishma and Daniel said, holds true, because they're working from home, But what I found is that the moment you create a reason for them to come together, to fight together, and to win together, just like our birthday campaign, people get energized, people find hope, right? So that brings me to what I like to share, because I do feel that there are two groups of people. When we talk about early talent, somehow we, even though we talk about the ones that are hit the most, I think you said Angela was 18 to 24. But even within that, I do segment the youths or the Gen Zs into a few groups, right? There's the aspirational ones, people who are asking about career and why am I performing, am I not? To me, those are people who kind of want more in life, and they only make up a percentage, like 25%, 30% of the youth population. There's another group who really don't even dare to say that, because they don't even know if there's a hope. Because you're talking about the impact of the VUCA world. I've never seen it hit our young people as much as this season, because even the non-Gen Zs, the non-youths, right, the non-early talents are also uncertain about what's going to happen in 1 year, in 2 years, or 3 years. What about people who come out and are facing with lots of uncertainty that we, who are more experienced, have already dealt with in the past? And with all this coming together, it caused a lot of multiple stress points. And my perspective that I'm actually very passionate about is, what are all these stress causing our young people today? So I think from that perspective, even in Lazada, one of the key projects I wanted to do was about health and well-being, but it wasn't, I really don't know how to do it, because a lot of things that I learned in the past is good to have, but may not be exactly hitting the nail on the head on trying to solve the problem. So I'm also very excited to learn from my fellow panelists, as well as the participants here, what are some of the ways we can help our young people together.
Great. Hi, everyone. This is Agnes. It's always hard to go last to comment on the topic when, what else can I add, right? But I think, what Daniel, Karishma, and Kevin mentioned, it really holds very true to our daily lives. When we look at our young talent in specific, and also our managers who manages them, right? One of the key things that we notice is really what kind of support can we provide to them? Because like our young talent, as my fellow panelist has mentioned, there's a lot of uncertainty that goes through their mind. They all are very eager to perform when they are in the organization, because they have a role. They feel that they are really much more fortunate. They have a role. They want to perform. They want to show that they are present. But yet everyone is working remotely at home last year. Today, I think the situation has evolved very quickly as many of the countries are opening up, and we're having a hybrid situation where people could come in, finally meet someone for the first time. But it's a very different scenario that we need to support them as well, because how do you then prioritize? How do you then balance? And for the experienced hires, what we are seeing is, we're just at last year, actually, there was a lot more last year than this year. We're managing teams as if there's no difference between online and offline. We kind of forgotten that there is actually, everyone seems to be on time at 8 a.m., so let's just start the day at 8 a.m. And then when we come back hybrid, we still start the day at 8 a.m., but you don't travel from your bed to your living room or the table to turn on the laptop. You actually have to travel, and that actually put on a lot of stress. So making sure that we are providing platforms, creating that awareness for also our hiring managers or our team managers, as much as it is for our young talent. And also making sure that we are also encouraging them to speak up. 2 weeks ago, I was hosting our young talent as a kickoff to the year. A lot of them are just very new. They join us the January batch that join us as our management trainees, and that's specifically what we talk about. Making sure that you have a voice, and how do you identify your voice to speak up to your managers and have that courage to speak up, because it's about managing expectations. If you want to have a great career, you need to know how to manage expectations, and that's going to be very important, giving them simple tools, simple advice as such. So we connect with them very, very regularly there.
Thanks, Agnes. I think that's some really good points there. And I'm actually going to ask you to stay unmuted, because I'm going to go to you for the next question, just to give you first bit at it. And it's a couple of questions into one. First of all, can you share with everybody what's the status in your organization around what the working environment is? Is it blended, remote? Are they in office? And how is that being considered for early talent cohorts, either currently in there or coming into your workplace in the next 6 months? And then from that, when we are focusing on the early talent, what would be the biggest concern that you or your colleagues who are responsible for early talent at L'Oréal, what's kind of the biggest concern that they have at the moment? In other words, what's kind of keeping you up at night when you're thinking about early talent coming into this new normal we're in right now?
Okay, I'll answer it in two parts, right? I think that the simple one is, what's our format today? Where it is possible, we would go into a hybrid format. Yeah. So most of our offices will provide and support our employees to have the selection of coming into the office and also working remote. Yeah. So there is that hybrid mode that we're all moving into where it is possible. Yeah. Of course, in some locations we are still very much remote, because it's still, the cases are still relatively high and all. But I think if we look at what's keeping us up at night, there are two things. When we look at early careers, we are really thinking about, those who we always have engaged, universities and schools that we are always partnering with, we have no issues there. They know where to find us, we know where to find them. But what's really bothering us is the folks who are probably not within our target universities. In the past, you have career fairs, etc., and so on, that they know they can easily stroll in and walk to, but because today everything has moved virtually, they probably don't have access to it. So we're coming up with lots of different intervention on how are we able to, provide access to not just the partners that we always work with, but also to, those who probably do not have as much access to, applying to employers like us as well. I think that's one very important thing that all our teams are working on, working with NGOs, working with different communities to make sure that we are also providing outreach and also access to students who are looking to join the workforce, and how are we supporting them to integrate into the workforce. I think the other part is really the ones that have already joined us. Their integration is probably top in mind for all of us. Most of them are quite competent, because that's the reason why they got recruited, right? But how do they really provide them with the skills, the kind of language that they need, the competencies that they need, the awareness that they need, integrating into a workforce that is really very much remote, at the point of joining or going into a hybrid space. How do you ensure that, hey, I want to be in the office the same time when my manager is in? I mean, we take Singapore, for example, we still have that 50%, restriction of turning up in the office. And frankly, it's fingers fastest first, whoever they can book coming in. And you might not turn up in the office the same time as your team. You might be the only one turning up in your team and everyone else is working remotely that day. And you might be working remotely and everyone turns up. How do you balance that? How do you manage that? And frankly, when you are the most junior person in the team, how do you get prioritized, right? These are very real issues and real questions. So how do we make sure that we support, the managers to have that awareness, for them to also, have that support in having that conversations with their managers, and making sure that we're constantly staying in touch with them. Last year I launched something and they gave me the feedback as well. We launched a program called TLC, and I always joke is where we give them tender loving care, but it's always at 2:00 Thursday. Every Thursday, 2 p.m., everyone knows that they will turn up. And this is across the world, across the region for us. It's a very broad region across many different time zones. And every week it's like my own radio talk show, but it is on purpose, right? We create that to get different managers coming to also show their vulnerability of them being managers. I remember the first call, almost all of us end up almost in tears, because the managers are saying that, look, it is very hard for you to tell your managers about your fears. But you know what, as managers, it's also very hard for us because we don't know how to manage anyone remotely. It was such an eye-opening moment for everybody to see, but that connection that it gave us was extremely powerful. But of course, then they say, Agnes, every week is a little bit too much, because we now have a fear of missing out. We want to make time to come. So we changed that to every month actually now. But it's been amazing in terms of the feedback that they have provided us on the integration back into the workforce. But that's Angela, to answer your question, is very much top in mind. Is still the integration into coming back physically.
Yeah, thanks, Agnes. I really love that example of the TLC and appreciating kind of letting the different parallels in the organization starting to get vulnerable and share with each other, which in turn can really help early talent start to navigate and understand how they're feeling in this time. Same question. I'm going to go reverse. So Calvin, Cash, then Dan. So I'll let you go ahead, Calvin.
In terms of work format, it's pretty much similar to what Agnes shared. So it's really fastest fingers first. I don't think we have so much of an issue with capacity, because I think we're still trying to people are still trying to get used to coming back. Yeah, but we do try to create some kind of, not policy, some kind of recommendations such that the teams will come back together, right? So we do say, like, let's come back a few days a week, and managers should try to arrange your team to come back together and yet manage capacity within that limit. But I still have the problem of suddenly there'll be a day like yesterday was like full house and people were not able to come in. So we're still figuring it out, I think, to answer the question, but we are on 50-50 generally. What's keeping me awake at night? It's not that related to the format, but yet related in the sense because I think we talked about the challenges of remote working. So we all understand that. But I actually didn't think too much about what that question because I was really listening to what Agnes was sharing and I thought that was a great idea of TLC. But there was a point that she brought up and I just like to share that, and I think that's very important to me as well. That's managers, right? So in my work, because across Lazada, I did a couple of HR roles. I look after HR for Redmart and Lazada Singapore. I look after the learning and talent development COE function, and now I'm on some HR projects, right? The managers are one group of people that I work a lot with very closely. So when we build the leadership academies and we start to work with them in different capacities, I also see the change in the mindset and the stress that they have to face or the challenges that they face. So before COVID, it's very easy in the leadership academy to talk about leadership development, the basic leadership skills, what you need to do, what you need to do to take care of the young talents. But the moment you hit the COVID, right, the managers themselves, especially those in the middle, they start to face, there's a sandwich managers start to face a different set of challenges. Whether to manage upwards their bosses or even to manage downwards is one thing. Secondly, because of the remote working environment, the need to fulfill or achieve the KPI became a big stress point. Because especially in the tech world, when things move so quickly, you really don't know how you're performing if there is no avenue for regular feedback. But you see, the thing is also that they don't really have regular feedback because everyone is so busy and there's so many more things that comes to their mind. So when the early career comes in this past 1 or 2 years, they're entering an environment where the managers are not so much prepared to take care of them. And yet this group of people are coming in a way with higher expectations and higher uncertainties. So there is this sudden demand and supply mismatch that I saw. And when we talk to the managers, it's not so simple. Like, one of the things I was doing a management forum session recently, and I was telling them, hey guys, there was a question asking me, what's one thing that we should take note of? And I was like, I wanted to say, okay, you know what, take care of your employees. We got a lot of young talents coming in now. But then I changed it and I told them, don't forget that while you are a manager, you have a manager too. And I realized how important it is for them to realize that they are part of a support system and the responsibility doesn't just fall on them to take care of below. So now we are looking at the ecosystem concept, and what's keeping me awake at night is how do I create this ecosystem of support? But it's a big change management that we need to have. So I'll just stop here for now. Thanks.
Great, Cash, over to you.
Thanks. I guess in terms of return back to the office, we're taking the same approach as everyone else. At the moment, we're all still working from home. But in terms of what keeps me up in the night, what Agnes said really resonated with me in terms of early careers and students who are not getting that access right now to organizations because there's no walk-in career fairs at the moment. And of course, as I mentioned, right now my role is I'm not covering campus or early careers at the moment, so I speak from the perspective of what I hear from students, and I work with a lot of students from non-mainstream universities as well through different organizations, and the challenge that they're feeling is getting that exposure. But there's a double flip here. One is obviously they're not getting that exposure because a lot of the events are happening virtually and may not necessarily be it may not necessarily be advertised or market beyond their core schools or schools that they are necessarily targeting. But then what I've seen as well is because these group of students are actually missing out, when they get that one opportunity, they already lax. So they're not jumping on that opportunity because they're just like, this is not going to get me anywhere. So it's, again, I guess, rebuilding the confidence in them that, hey, whilst this is happening, you're not forgotten about, and actually telling and actually bringing it to the forefront for them to understand how valuable it is when it comes your way. So I think that's what's keeping me awake, because I'm working with a lot of these marginalized students who are currently missing out a lot of opportunities because we've gone virtual, and a lot of the events are targeted to mainstream universities.
Yeah, a really important perspective. Thank you. Dan, I'm sure you agree with a lot that's already been said. Anything else you'd like to include or add from an ABB perspective?
I'll probably just go real brief because it's kind of covered largely as well, and I learned a couple of things from the rest of the panels. But I think it have to. So for us, it's also hybrid, but then because we're actually more engineering based, it also means that some of these jobs, like keeping the utility companies running, keeping the factories, etc., you need service people to be on site as well. So it's more difficult probably in some areas because you gotta have engineers and technicians being on site as well. So the policy which right now is being done is looking at each businesses, and then the HRBPs would kind of drive it with a set of framework per se. But largely safety is a big part of the team, so we still want to make sure that there's a balance how we support the customers and we take care of our own, let's say, people as well. So hybrid, it's let's say a loosely used word. How many percent, let's say, to office, how many percent, let's say, on site? It's kind of like depending on the teams. But concern wise, I would say probably attraction and retention still is maybe the largest bit of it. Attraction for us is we are moving towards IT type of landscape from engineering. So that means that we're not on top of mind. I see we have Isabella here from Amazon. You always have people streaming to booths like this, virtual fairs and so on, but for us it's not on top of mind. So it's really because of the trends shifting from, let's say, a new environment. So how do we kind of attract these folks as well that we typically don't think of us as an ideal employer, but there's just so many demand and so on. So just really rethinking how we approach from that attraction market of it. And also if we use, like, for example, Teams or virtual manners, how do we then add on tools to kind of be more engaging? Just not just a webinar, for example. Can we make it gamified in certain areas? So just thinking through a box a little bit. But when it comes to retention, I think it's still back to the fundamentals, the hygiene factors. You need to pay well, you need to have a good environment, you have the values that you preach, you got to be practicing them internally, right? And I think a big part of it with that virtual shift is the care element, where managers are just sometimes too swamped in their work, and so how do we set up things to then make sure that our early talents are not forgotten. So it's not the easiest because you have really managers that have different philosophies across. So it's not one size fit all. So sometimes we empathize with the early talents because they feel like, I can't talk to my manager because maybe they are not so approachable in some areas, or they are just very KPI driven. But we hear different thoughts. Some of them, have managers spending time as well. So I think, this is probably something that I feel quite a bit for the early talents. I guess there's no one solution to it, but it's something that I would like to hear as well from the rest. Maybe you have suggestions that we can kind of pick up as well. So I'll just leave it as this point. Yeah.
Thanks, Dan. Really important, and I would like us to move into the lens of training and development and bringing that connection theme through, which seems to be coming a lot and consistently across the region in particular. Before I do, though, I'd like to invite Josh from a global lens perspective, kind of really thinking about how employers have been considering the hybrid working environments globally, and where you're seeing kind of focus on how companies are supporting well-being. Is there anything in addition you'd like to add from already the great insights we've received?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ange. At a global level, clearly you're dealing with different territories that are culturally different, economically different, but also COVID stage different, right? But also over the last 5 years have maybe been making different shifts in early talent recruitment, which is impacting the cohorts that employers around the world are now managing through the pandemic. So I think one of the biggest impacts or lenses that well-being and development has been looked at is actually through the lens of diversity. So when you bring together everything a diverse cohort brings, they might be socially diverse, economically diverse, racially diverse, academically diverse, location diverse. and then you've spent 5 years building a more diverse cohort, and then you wrap a pandemic over the top of it, you have a really complex scenario of what people need and what people are going through. Now, without going down the sort of doomsday challenge of that, one of the upsides of that actually that we're seeing and have been seeing is it's brought to the surface and provided a platform. Well-being and the pandemic has provided a real platform to table inclusion and table belonging, because you can have all the the hybrid working strategies and helping the cohorts connect and build relationships with the managers and give them the skills that they theoretically all need. And what needs doing in a hybrid sense is building a cohort with a sense of belonging with each other, a sense of belonging with the organization, a sense of feeling included. And I feel like the pandemic has made those conversations in terms of talent strategy, development strategy, easier, more obvious, more pertinent, more relevant than they have ever been. And you think about it, if you've got social diversity, racial diversity, economic diversity in your cohort, what the pandemic has arguably done is leveled the playing field a little, because now everyone's working through a computer screen. And some of the social, the social dynamics when a cohort comes together are not there. So everyone's having to make a different effort to connect, to work out their role, so on and so forth. And it's allowed, I think, more diverse cohorts to bring their talents to their jobs on maybe a more equal playing field, if you like. I think also just considering the development needs and development approaches. Do you go virtual? Do you bring people into the office face to face, etc.? At a global level, employers are needing to flex to different people's levels of comfort with COVID, regardless of what government restrictions may or may not say. So, just because in England, for example, all bets are off and you can do whatever you want at the moment, just about, doesn't mean everyone is comfortable to do so. And so even though, you're allowed to go in the office, you don't need to wear a face mask, no one needs to test, which is the scenario in England as of a few weeks ago, which is fun. How comfortable does someone feel traveling into London to attend a big event? Some will, some won't. And so there's a diversity of comfort as well, let alone a diversity of restrictions. But what we are seeing over, I guess, at a macro level overall, one of the biggest ways employers are helping their early talent work in a hybrid context and in that macro environment is deploying graduate development budget towards soft and human skills that empower their early talent, their graduates, to support their own well-being. And so what we're seeing and what we're helping all the organizations we work with around the world is actually designing a 12 or 24-month development program, not just to meet the business needs and business commercial purpose of having a program to begin with, but also designing it through the lens of well-being, designing it through the lens of building confidence, helping people build skills around adaptability, helping people build links and relationships across the organization, helping people internally develop and manage motivation. And those sort of 4 areas: confidence, adaptability, links, motivation, fill out of our research, and maybe you've come across that in our work before, but actually using those areas of well-being as a lens to design the development program overall.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Really, really nice segue into the kind of the lens of training and development. And what was really interesting from DBL's perspective, and probably unsurprising for many of you to hear, is that from our research, when we were looking at the early career employees, they haven't enjoyed the same confidence levels through some of the stories that we're already hearing from the panel, and in terms of their performance, just really not getting an idea or a gauge of how well they're actually performing. They don't have a comparison on that, particularly if they're doing that in remote environments. They might not be in an office at the same time their peers are of the same level in the organization. So all these things are starting to play out on, you know, their greater need for support when it comes to working in remote or hybrid contexts. And so kind of with that lens on training and development, I'd love to ask the panel, what are your observations on the confidence levels of your current early talent cohorts? And then from your perspective, as in your organization's perspective, what skills are you seeing that early talent are really needing now going into this current period of time? Dan, I'll go to you first. I'll let you go in first for that one.
Sure. Yeah, so I guess this question is a little bit more harder to answer. So if you say confidence level, I really say it's a yes and no, meaning in some areas, maybe their confidence level has dipped, maybe for job searching, etc., because the competition has been harder, they've been applying for jobs and don't hear back. But then I've also observed maybe like 2 years back when the pandemic started, we just onboarded like a cohort for our solution engineers in my previous company. It was a full scale, let's say, virtual onboarding, 2 months plus, etc. And then when they kind of went into the role, because we hit into COVID, a lot of these like customer engagement sessions were actually virtual. But what I've observed is that actually the graduates, early talents who came into the role, they demonstrated more confidence in the, let's say, setting up the webinar, using the different tools to engage, because they were simply just more well-versed and more familiar with some of the tools that are being used compared to, you know, some of our, let's say, managers or customers, experienced people who were used to face-to-face type of web engagement, you know, the actual hosting of events and so on. So I would say it depends also on that specific skill sets. And I do see that they also tend to self-learn quite a bit. So if they don't know something, they are very quick to like Google, or they would just basically check it out online, post it on the forum, you know, get different viewpoints as well. So in that sense, I think they also are seen to be a little bit more agile, but obviously everybody's personality is also different. So you see those that really require a lot more, let's say, nurturing to be, you know, reinforcing their confidence as well. And I think this is not one size fit all. So you have different personalities, just like we all are, you know, different just because we are human, right? So this would be probably what I would say from a confidence level, yes and no. And then I guess from a skill sets perspective, just very broadly speaking, hard skills will be needed, but you also see fundamentally a shift from, you know, typically doing things a little bit more manual towards an automated way of doing. And that's also one of the, from a business model, we're trying to talk to the customers and we say, you know, you don't have to buy this kind of things. You can use it on subscription, on demand. And I think the whole business model of things are also changing. And that means the workforce also needs to adapt. But like what Kelvin mentioned, we're in such uncertain times that, you know, you can't just really anticipate so easily what's going to happen. Nobody anticipated the war that was going to happen. Nobody anticipated the fuel, you know, hikes will be like this, and this ripples an effect in logistics, supply chains, and many more things. So for us, we think, I guess, 2 buckets that really would help, you know, from a soft skill, let's say, training. Number one, probably would be really, how do you adapt, right? So we're talking about being able to have maybe frameworks like design thinking, etc., to then help people to very quickly think out of the box, be critical about it, and kind of pivot from one situation to the other without necessarily having the managers to say, hey, you know, you need to do this, etc. They can kind of figure out, read up things, and then be able to anticipate. Communication skills, we've also realized that it's something that we kind of need to groom as well, because sometimes it comes across as a little bit unpolished, and then we're all in a virtual manner. So this is something that we do. For example, we do a session for from campus to corporate for some of our graduates, just to make sure that they have basic etiquettes that you assume is there. But then, you know, when they do presentations, or, you know, they yawn in front of the camera, for example, you know, just small things like this, you just have to just remind them from an early starting point. And I think the other bits of it would probably, if I had to put it, is maybe resiliency skills. So if you pick up a couple of, let's say, research paper and so on, and they ask like senior executives what are some of the, like, say, softer skills that they feel is quite essential, I think you will see this quite high on. So resiliency, group building, and so on, just so that, you know, people find ways to then kind of cope with it and normalize things that Otherwise, you would just have to spoon feed, and we all know it's not the easiest to do. So just really building that capability from a softer skill. But of course, hard skill, you have just so many things that you can take out from a playbook, and there's so many vendors, right? So I think every company has their unique set of harder skills, but I think the shift is moving from a more manual work towards automation, and how to then manage those automation, or how to build tools to ease and just kind of run things quicker, easier, and without less intervention. So sorry if I went on and on, but this is I guess an interesting topic as well. So I'll hold my mic.
Yeah, that's great, Dan. Thanks very much. And as expected, we knew that we're not going to have enough time to talk as depth as we want to in this hour we have together, but the perspectives that you're all sharing is fantastic. Open invite to the panel. Anything that's not covered from Dan that your organization is covering when it talks about skills, top skills that you're thinking are critical for your early talent? I'm sure the rest of the community would love to hear that.
I should have spoke less. So.
Nothing much.
Dan, you might have covered it all.
Yeah.
Sorry, Calvin?
I just wanted to say that Daniel covered it all. Indeed. I just building on one thing is that I think it's not a skill, but I think the importance of having a mentor is very important at this stage. And I'm not sure if that's a skill, but the being intentional about finding someone to walk this journey with you is important. So just adding that point.
I think from our perspective at DBL in terms of training and development needs, I mean, Daniel, you listed off a range of really relevant skills there. I think some of the skills that we are seeing employers be really hungry for their interns and the grads, that as a global skills development business, we just weren't producing content and delivering development on some of these areas pre-pandemic. And those types of areas, like these sort of new emerging areas that are becoming quite popular, are skills around, actual skills around confidence. So we wouldn't actually normally train on that specifically. Motivation, 5 years ago, and training on that specifically, and building that into development, programs. Purpose, understanding what your purpose is, your core values, what you truly want to be doing with your career. This is awesome stuff. And we were founded on the value of growth, of personal growth. So this is really kind of getting down to the core of what does it mean to be human, and what does it mean to navigate, the world and your career. Skills around actually owning your belonging. Like what are the things that you can do to belong more with the organization and feel more included in the organization. Skills for managers around supporting well-being. These are all areas we just weren't researching, producing content on, delivering training on around the world pre-pandemic. That is almost everyday stuff for us now in development programs. So I think that's really worth highlighting.
In terms of confidence, I actually have one thing I want to share. So in my previous role, we set up a Junior Talent Council that was run by the Junior Talent cohort. And this was through this platform, a lot of our junior talent actually got exposure to senior leaders and were able to be part of panel discussions with senior leaders. So whether they were moderating the session, whether they were facilitating the session, or whether they were part of a panel together with senior leaders. And I think this allowed for open conversations between early careers and leaders and managers. And I think that actually elevated some of the stress from our early careers and increased their confidence to a certain level. Because what they were finding is when we were doing wider fireside chats with leaders across all the early careers versus when we were having smaller group discussions, they were finding themselves more confident to put up their hand and actually reach out to one of the council chairs, who were one of the senior leaders, to actually have a conversation in terms of how they're feeling and where they want to get to. We've seen a big change, obviously, between when the pandemic started and where we are today, because managers have been given tools to support them in supporting their junior talent, and junior talent have been given sort of a platform to be able to reach out to their council members who are working with them and for them, together with senior leaders.
Yeah, I was going I was going to add to what Josh was mentioning. When Josh mentioned, I think one of the things that we realize in going remote and coming back, the biggest challenge that even we struggle is really decoding the organization. I think in the past when we are all walking down the hallway, at the coffee corner, getting at the water cooler corner, getting a drink, you can just go, hey, hi, I'm new, and which department do you work in? Today, when we go on and offline, almost immediately, nobody knows anyone else except the projects that they work on. So decoding the organization becomes an extremely important additional skills that we are actually supporting our young talent on to how do they, kind of map out the organization. It's not about an org chart, but it's around how do you build your network in the organization. And it's a very critical, kind of career life skills that we have identified with.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with everything that Agnes, you and the panel has shared. Very similar to what we're seeing elsewhere in the globe, navigating and helping to support those things on confidence. Josh, as you mentioned, building things like links. Some of these skills that we never really focused on before are now becoming front and center as a priority to really help talent across all levels, but more so with the early talent to really think about how they're starting to build that. I hate to say this, we're actually at time. Can you believe it? That's how quickly an hour goes. I would love to keep you all trapped for the next 2 hours so we can keep talking and collaborating and sharing. But I'm sure many of you have to move on to more meetings and connections with your own team members going forward. So I want to take a moment to just thank all our panelists and of course for Josh as well for your input and support. Fantastic to hear all your perspectives coming through. And I'm sure for anyone who has been joining us, feel free to connect with them on LinkedIn. I'm sure they'll be happy to connect and share further insights and information that they've got from there. From DBL's perspective, when we start to think about some of these, the skills and the development and how does that play into well-being and supporting early talent, we have uncovered some quite critical aspects of how we help to build what we call the tenet of calm back into our early talent capabilities. And so as an ongoing, what we'll do is we'll make sure we send a follow-up communication to you all and share with you some of these skills that have been addressed and what are being prioritized at the moment that can really help support your development programs as you look to confirm and cement those. But thank you everybody for your time. It was a pleasure to see you. I appreciate all the chat and the conversations in the chat. There's some really great ideas coming through. And Val, anything else from your end or we're happy to close?
Nothing else on my end, Ange. Thank you everyone for your time, and for the panelists, thank you so much for your invaluable sharing. So with this, we'd like to close off the session and have a very pleasant rest of your week ahead.
Thanks everybody, take care.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you, well done.